This is the Gavel. Welcome. I'm Terry Ikumi. Here's your weekly update on the activities of the National Assembly. The 4 tax reform bills caused slight drama in the Senate as some senators protested the entry of the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the Director General of the Budget Office, and some consultants into the chamber. Now, the Senate leader, Senator Kwemi Bamidele, had moved a motion to allow the team into the chamber when the outburst ensued. Senator Abdul Ningi from Bauchi Central and Senator Aline Dume from Borno State raised objections over the Senate's decision to suspend the business of the day and deal with controversial tax reform bills in spite of its validity. But unlike the Senate, the House is going about this rather peacefully, perhaps taking a cue from what happened in the Senate. The Deputy Speaker presided over a closed-door session on the tax bills, and the House resolved to receive the team from the presidency who will shed more light on the bills. So here's a report on what transpired this last week on the tax reform bills.
What began as a routine plenary session in the Senate on Wednesday quickly spiraled into a tense and dramatic affair barely an hour after lawmakers had settled for the business of the day.
We are trying to make everything open.
The session, initially scheduled to address items listed on the order paper, took an unexpected turn when the Deputy Senate President, Senator Barao Jibrin, made an announcement to suspend its rules.
In conjunction with the leadership, decided to invite the chairman of FRRS and experts in tax laws to come down here to brief us about the tax bill. Let consultants tell us what is there. Let the crafters of the bill, that is FRS, tell us about the bill. We want to make it as open as possible.
The move sparked immediate protest from some senators who raised strong objections.
I don't see anywhere whereby the senators should allow these people to come here and make the kind of interactions they so want. However, committees of the Senate and Appropriation can invite for the interaction of this manner, but not the Senate in session.
Visibly agitated, another senator reacted with an outburst.
We should not in any way try to use the position of the Senate, because the order paper is clear and we have been doing this. I have no problem having them to come here and explain whatever. We have been doing that, but we follow known procedures. It is not a matter that you just come and tell us after we are doing business of the day. Mr. President, you can have your way, but I will have my say. Please, I beg you in the name of God, in the name of God, this matter is very, very important to not only us, but Nigerians that we represent. And we swear by Bible and Holy Quran that will represent the interests of the people. And that
you have made your point. Can I respond to you?
You can rule me out of order.
Let me respond. Let me respond to you, please. We are not here for rhetorics. We are acting on fact. Excuse me. Order, please. The Senate shall, by resolution, regulate its procedure. This is what we have just done. This is the resolution that we have just passed. You needed to have known what we have done. I therefore rule you out of order.
At the height of the disagreement, the aggrieved senators attempted a walkout in protest, but rescinded their decision after intervention. Minutes after, Senator Aline Dume demanded an apology from the Deputy Senate President for using offensive language during the exchange.
It shall be out of order to use offensive and insulting language. You called what I just mentioned on the point of order that I raised. You sitting there to say it's rhetorics. I think it's very unfortunate and you should apologize.
I don't think the word rhetorics is a negative word. It's not an offense. Nobody used that against you. In the context it was used, it wasn't used against you. It was a general statement. I therefore rule out of order.
After the dust settled, the tax team was then given the floor.
Our budget is very low. It's not enough to fund our development. For the year 2024 that is coming to an end, the total of the budget of the federal government, including the amendment to the Appropriation Act, and all the 36 states of the Federation, comes to about 51.1 trillion naira only. When government cannot raise revenue rightly and they print money to spend, it is effectively taxation without legislation because the value of the money in everybody's pocket reduces proportionately. Unfortunately, this way of imposing taxes without legislation further impose more burden on the lower end of the ladder.
At the end of their explanations, the lawmakers declined to ask questions. 24 hours later, the tax bills were scheduled for second reading. In an apparent determination to address the concerns raised, the Senate almost immediately dissolved into a closed-door session over the bills.
Mr. President,
upon resumption, the Senate leader led the debate on the general principles of the bills.
there is proposed huge reduction in company income tax from the current 30% to 25% by 2026 as part of deliberate attempt to curtail the incidence of double taxation and multiplicity of taxes and levies, multiple taxes hitherto paid by companies under various tax heads. It is proposed that the sharing formula should allow state government share 55% of VAT revenue from the current 15% to 10% sharing formula.
There is a move and a commitment by the executive to address that issue of revenue derivation, to ensure that paying taxes, even for the oil workers that are flown in and flown out every day out there on work or 2 days, be calculated and paid. If that is done, I think that is a good move that should be supported.
There was, however, one dissenting voice.
I would have preferred we remove the baby and throw away the water first. And that is to go with what the governors and NEC proposed. You withdraw the bill, work on it, and then submit it to the National Assembly again after getting the buy-in of the governors and NEC.
I beg to disagree with you that this bill should be withdrawn first and consultation should be held with the Nigerian Governors Forum and traditional rulers. We have a procedure which is clearly and unambiguously stated in our rule book. This bill is noble, it's pro-people because it's trying to reduce the tax burden on Nigerians.
Meanwhile, just like the Senate, the House of Representatives held a closed-door session which lasted over an hour. Upon resumption of plenary, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who presided, disclosed how the House intends to approach the tax reform bills.
Please do consult as you go on this weekend. Come back with more robust idea and debate as we look into this matter finally on Tuesday. I wish you happy deliberation and consultation.
All right, let's turn to the MTEF now. The House of Representatives has adopted the recommendations of the Committees on Finance and National Planning as well as Economic Development on the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper. One of the recommendations in the report mandates relevant committees to investigate reports from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Responsibility Commission, alleging that the NNPC withheld 8.48 trillion naira as claimed subsidies for petrol. The committees are further directed to verify the total cumulative amount of unremitted revenue, also known as under-recovery, from the sale of premium motor spirits by the NNPC between 2020 and 2023. Meanwhile, the Senate held an interactive session on the MTEF and the FSP. So let's take a look into that report.
So I think we need to take this back home.
The interactive session by the Senate Joint Committee on Finance came days after President Bola Tinubu submitted the medium-term expenditure and fiscal strategy paper to the National Assembly. Ministers of Finance Wale Edun, Budget and National Planning Atiku Bagudu, the Director General of the Budget Office Tanimu Yakubu, the NNPC Group CEO Mele Kyari, and the Chairman of the FIRS, amongst others, were in attendance.
We're expecting a robust bumper harvest this year, and this normally accounts for 40% of inflation.
In the fact-finding exercise, the revenue-generating agencies delineated their 2024 budget performance as well as the 2025 revenue projections.
As at the middle of November, sometimes last week, we have reached these targets. We will expect to make an increase of 20% on the 2024 performance.
Mr. Chairman, we will exceed our overall delivery by at least ₦1 trillion. Our target, our budget was 12.3 trillion, but we will meet 13.1 trillion by the end of this year. We will deliver at least 23.7 trillion naira to the Federation next year.
The presentations by the agencies apparently indicated excess revenue target for 2024, prompting the question of borrowing.
All the presentation made, they said they have met their target. What has been collected is over 51 trillion naira. And what has been budgeted is 30-something trillion. What are we doing with the excess revenue?
Borrowing, as we've said, is not a crime, it's not a problem. When we borrow in line with what is being approved for us by National Assembly, we are actually carrying out our responsibility. So meeting the target and borrowing, they are not conflicting, and it's not self-serving.
The revenue effort has been good, but we still need to do better. And in the meantime, we still need to borrow productively, effectively, and sustainably, all in an aim to invest in the Nigerian economy, not just infrastructure, but also social services, health services, education, and intervention in terms of a social safety net to help the poorest and most vulnerable.
However, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission have different views on the subject of borrowing.
My brothers in NNPC, we should go back and look at the OICs. The revenue hanging in that OICs is in dollars. If we can rect this into our accounts, we don't need to borrow.
What is important for countries as well as companies, that is what analysts pay attention to, is the projection consistent with what the entities say it is doing. Are we funding a strategy? Yes, we are.
In the Green Chamber, the Deputy Speaker chaired the Committee of Supply as members settled down for the consideration of the report on all the important medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper 2025 to 2027. The report proposes projected all benchmark prices at $75, $76.2, and $75.3 per barrel in 2025, 2026, and 2027, as well as domestic crude oil production pegged at 2.06, 2.10, and 2.35 million barrels per day for the subsequent years of 2025, 2026, and 2027. Inflation rate is projected at 15.75%, 14.21%, and 10.04% for 2025, 2026, and 2027.
Putting this very ambitious target of 2.06 and 2.35, we are not likely to achieve it. And if we don't achieve it, we know that we are tightening our belt because we're already projecting that we are going to sell 2.06. And if we sell lower than that, we get lesser fund.
When you have projections, it's not certainty. And to get to this projection level, the operators of the NUPRC gave us the details. As of today, they are above 1.8, they are closer to 2 million.
The projection for 2025 is about 2 months away. That's where I'm going to. So I'm saying that The projection is over-ambitious.
Minority Leader, 2025 is not January 2025. That it will happen in 2025 is the projection. That is what, but so when you say it's only 2 months, I don't think that is very logical. We're saying the projection is saying within the year of 2025.
Lawmakers also reacted to the proposed GDP growth rate of 4.6%, 4.4%, and 5.5% for the years 2025, 2026, and 2027, as well as the exchange rate of 1,400 naira to the dollar for 2025, 2026, and 2027, which the committee says is subject to review in early 2025 according to monetary and fiscal policies.
The CBN, the Monetary Policy Committee, hiked interest rate yesterday. I think it's currently at 27.5%. The governor met the House committee recently, Your Excellency, and he assured us that they've taken their decisions based on accurate data. The problem is it's always better to underpromise and overdeliver. There is a risk in this aspect, and we go back to borrowing, and they'll see us as the house that is accepting borrowing.
Let us revert to managed floating. If they are saying 1,004, with the understanding that we are going to do managed floating, then I'll go with 1,004.
The House also adopts the recommendation to investigate reports from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Responsibility Commission alleging that the NNPC withheld 8.48 trillion naira as claimed subsidies for petrol. The investigation is expected to address the NATI report that the NNPC failed to remit 3.6 trillion naira in taxes to the federal government.
Welcome back to the Gavel. The breakdown this week looks at the single 6-term tenure bill for the president and governors, which failed at the National Assembly. Take a listen.
I think there are different proposals for constitutional amendment. There are proposals even for reducing the number of constituencies. Some have even proposed a parliamentary system of government. Again, I think that the National Assembly applies its processes, and if a bill doesn't pass second reading, of course, that brings it to an end. But it may also be that a bill is again retabled, depends on who the sponsors of the bill are, and if a bill is retabled, the proper thing to do is, of course, to send it to the committee charged with amendment of the Constitution, which will do a public hearing on it, and as well come back to the National Assembly plenary to make recommendations on its findings, and members of the National Assembly can vote on the proposal. So I think at this stage, it should be a fertile ground for all sorts of proposals and bills, and the plenary can, when the Constitutional Review Committee finishes its work, it can then vote on the recommendations of the committee. Unless it is deficient procedurally, but as to its contents, no matter how much merit you think it lacks, it's important that it is critically examined by the Committee on Constitutional Review, which can come back to the National Assembly to say, these are our suggestions on how to go. With respect to ordinary bills, that is bills that are not constitutional alteration bills, it's quite straightforward that the National Assembly can decide that the bill will not pass second reading, and that would be the end of it. Those are bills that do not have to go through alteration of the Constitution process. So there are two issues here, and I think that when this is understood, then perhaps it is quite clear that unless a bill on the face of it for constitutional amendment is bad, then other than that, the bills should go to the committee charged with that responsibility. I think that there's been a long-standing discussion in the public space, particularly amongst my colleagues from civil society who feel that the Constitution was imposed on Nigeria by the military as a decree. I think that that question will continue to come up until the country decides that the proper process of enacting and giving to Nigeria a new constitution is followed. And that's why there's all of this whole question about we the people, that we the people did not give ourselves on this constitution. It was given to us by the military under a decree. There will come a day when the issue of legitimizing a constitution for Nigeria would happen, and I think that that day is important to happen soon. But as to the system of government, I think it needs to also be clearly understood that a lot of people feel that the character of the Nigerian state, the balance, the structure, is unbalanced. So in answering the question whether you should have a constitutional presidential system or a parliamentary system, a parliamentary system cannot exist until you deal with the question of imbalance in the structure of representation in the country. If we can deal with that along with the conversation around parliamentary system, then that works well and good. But if you are to take the current imbalance into a parliamentary system of government, then the sense of oppression that a certain part or certain parts of the country feel will be intensified. So it's not a subject that simply says you transit from presidential to parliamentary. No, you must cure the huge imbalance that exists at this time in the country for you to achieve an equitable parliamentary system if we are to go in that direction.
And on Constituency Focus this week, we speak with Senator Shuaibu Afolabi, representing Ogun West Federal Constituency.
What have I done in the last 6 months or so that I've been here? First, from the perspective of my constituency, number one of the first things I did was to do training for our youth. We have a large percentage of Nigerian population that is youth. And therefore, the first thing I did was to do training for 50 selected youth for almost 2 weeks across the 6 local government of Ogun Central Senatorial District. Not only did we train them, we also provided them with tools, particularly laptop. And what makes this project different is that we're not just giving them tools or giving them training, we are doing a follow-up. So they've been given the training, they've been given a laptop, and they've also come back in a few months' time to showcase what they have been able to do, because it is the continuous process. The second thing in that area as well is that I've been able to attract a few ICT centers. So there's an ICT community center that will be formally unveiling very soon in Abeokuta. And we have also done 2 ICT centers in 2 secondary schools, one in the local government, the other one in the 4 local government, as part of creating opportunities and platforms for the children, particularly secondary school students, to learn about ICT skills. That is a new learning, that's the new knowledge, particularly in an area that the global competitiveness of nations is no longer determined by the amount of minerals under the soil, but by the assets that your citizens carry in their head. Therefore, we are catching them young. We are doing this. But we also need to speak to the issue of sustainability, particularly the issue of climate. Recently, the whole world gathered in Dubai to talk about climate change. But we also recognize that, particularly for our women. So we are done training for about 300 women for them to be aware about the individual responsibility to maintaining a very conducive climate that we can pass on to the next generation. So these 300 women, they were trained on the impact of burning forests, the impact of using firewood instead of gas, and they were also provided with cooking gas materials in order to move them away from activities that could impact negatively on the climate, to things that are sustainable. These are some of the things we have done within the constituency, but on a global scale, on a national scale rather. 65-70% of our population is youth. But we have, even with the best efforts, we can't get employment for all of them in one fell swoop. What do we need to do? Someone has read pharmacy, has read computer science, has read medicine. He has graduated, he has served. There's no job. A few things happen to him. Number one, he doesn't have a productive engagement, so it's idle, it's available. For those of them who might not be strong enough, they're available to do things that are, if you like, against social norms. Number two, they're also losing their skills. You graduate, you don't have the skills. You don't have an opportunity to practice the skills. Number three, you also don't have a stipend. So their confidence themselves, the dignity of the school, the education they've had, begins to be eroded. So this bill seeks to achieve two things. Number one, if somebody has studied mass communication as an example, and the Minister of Information doesn't have a permanent employment for him, or the channels of this or of TVC, you can afford to have him on internship. Maybe 3 days a week. And it's based on stipends. What this does is, number one, we will have a national database of people who are looking for employment or are underemployed. As the saying goes, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it.
Now, the House has adopted a report of its ad hoc committee on the confirmation and screening of the acting chief of army staff and confirmed the appointment of Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede as the chief of army staff. General Oluyede was screened behind closed doors by the House ad hoc committee. The question for many is, what part of the Constitution makes provision for confirmation of appointments by the House of Representatives? Anyways, next week we'll get the breakdown from the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center on this issue. And thanks for your time. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.